All right, here we go. We are on. Thank you everyone for joining today's webinar, Cracking the Code, How to Successfully Sell to CISOs. We have a packed agenda, which we will jump into right away. First, just a couple housekeeping items. This session is being recorded and will be made available online. You will all be notified when it is available. Also, we've received a large number of questions in advance. Thank you very much, which is great. And we've built some of those questions into the agenda. But please use Zoom if you'd like to add any, and we'll either get to it during this session or try to provide feedback afterwards. Now, I do have a few slides to share here. This session is being brought to you by ISMG, the world's leading provider of information and education focused on cybersecurity and related areas. ISMG maintains 36 online media properties dedicated to various topics, verticals, and geographies with regards to cybersecurity. They manage somewhere around 200 to 300 events every year, ranging from larger summits to more intimate executive roundtables all over the world. They maintain a cybersecurity education channel called cybered.io and a marketing advisory arm, Cyber Theory, who is responsible for producing this session. And finally, we would not be here without CyberEd Board, ISMG's peer-to-peer networking community for practicing CISOs. And now we're going to turn it over and introduce our panelists. First and foremost, I'm your moderator, Mike DiAgostino. I'm the general manager of ISMG and Cyber Theory, and I'm joined by my colleague, Julie Jordan, the director of marketing and media strategy with Cyber Theory. Julie, say hello.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for being here.
Appreciate it. And now about your panelists, a quick introduction, and then we'll let each of them speak for themselves. We've Eric Hart, the CISO with Cushman & Wakefield. We have Robert LaMagna-Reiter, the CISO with Huddle, and Patty Ryan, the CISO with Quidel Ortho. Panelists, please tell us a little bit more about yourselves, your organizations, and what you view as your main role and responsibility at your company. I'll turn to Eric just because you're first on my screen. Why don't you kick things off?
Sure. So thank you very much, and I'm glad to be here. So, been in cybersecurity for 20 plus years. Really my role in the organization is, the whole global cybersecurity program. So, risk management, governance, identity access management, the technical security, and then also the security of how we're doing things with our clients' information. It's really interesting, and I'm glad to be talking about this today, just coming from a recent CISO meeting where there were a bunch of salespeople there, and really some of the pros and cons that I had in the interactions with some of them. And, I will give some advice based on some interesting interactions that I had there.
Great. Looking forward to it. Appreciate it. How about Robert?
Hi, pleasure to be here, and I appreciate the opportunity to participate. I've been in information security and risk management for almost 18 years, not quite as long as Eric, and have had the pleasure of working in several verticals and industry types. But here at Huddle, I'm leading our security and compliance program. Huddle offers solutions across 40 teams, 40 different sports, internationally, to capture, analyze, and learn from video and data. And so as a result of that, my team and I are in charge of not only providing guidance to our product teams to ensure we have the most appropriate security controls over that, that sensitive or other type of protected data, as well as guiding the internal organization to adhere to common standards. So we advise on strategy, architecture, engineering, operations, and partner quite a bit with our counterparts across privacy, legal, finance to ensure we have a well-rounded and business resilient supported enterprise.
Very good. A very cool company. If anybody hasn't heard of Huddle, I encourage you to look into it for any budding athletes out there. Very interesting. And last but not least, Patty.
Hi, Patty Ryan. I'm with Quidel Ortho. We are a medical device manufacturer. everything from at-home COVID tests to large clinical chemistry and blood analyzers used in major hospitals and blood centers. I run the information security program, so everything from traditional policy governance, information risk management, compliance, to manufacturing security, technical architecture, security operations, R&D security, and deals a lot with government regulators as well as customers. Then right now, again, if you could understand medical device in the spirit of COVID and the spirit of hospitals, the biggest challenge we have is just making sure that whatever we put into the health center is absolutely as secure as it can be, so that we do not contribute to the footprint of our customers in the time of pandemics, et cetera, where they have other priorities.
Yeah. Sounds like you have quite a bit going on there, a lot of responsibilities, very important responsibilities as well. So appreciate you being here. Good. Well, let's dive into it. So just to kick things off, to help set us up, I took the liberty of asking every marketer's newest friend, ChatGPT, what is the best way for a salesperson to connect with a CISO? An excerpt from the response you can see on the screen is, the best way for a salesperson to connect with the Chief Information Security Officer is to understand their pain points and demonstrate how their product or service can help solve them. Building a relationship based on trust and understanding is key. This can be achieved through research and tailored communication. Also, providing valuable information and resources to the CISO without expecting anything in return. The response is a bit generic, but no one can argue with the suggestions, I think. But how many cybersecurity vendor sales and business development reps actually follow this advice? If we were to directly poll CISOs, of which we have a few here, we think the majority would probably say not many. So how do you create that trust with CISO prospects, provide valuable insight, and all at the same time, pitch your company's product and service? Well, we hope our panelists can offer some insight. So let me stop sharing. We'll go into full screen mode here. We have a laundry list of questions. Again, many of these submitted by our attendees in advance. And so I'd like to just jump right in. The first question, just to set the stage for the rest of this session, is based on the fact we hear from so many vendors who only want to talk to CISOs. Their only desire is FaceTime with you, our panelists. So let's start off by clarifying, what exactly is the CISO's role when it comes to investigating, evaluating, and considering new cybersecurity technologies for your organization? Eric, again, you're first on my screen. Why don't you kick us off?
Sure. So for us, I mean, what my role is we looked at different tooling of things of when we went into cloud security, it's okay, look, we need to do something here more than what we've been doing. Did I go and say to the team and yep, okay, now go look at these products with this and that? Was I making the call? Was I on those? No. I think a big miss in a lot of the cybersecurity sales, especially in the technical security side, install this, endpoint that, whatever, is you're right. They want to have that FaceTime with me to start. And literally, it's not going to happen. The way you're going to get to my desk or have a meeting, virtual and stuff with me, is you've convinced my team, the people who are going to have to run and operate it and live and breathe it every day of their life, that we need this and here's why. Then it's okay, I'll look at it, then I'll pose questions and other things. But when I recently just attended a CISO think tank, and I had a vendor come to me and it's yeah, we want to talk to you about DLP in your organization. We're the best. We're better than the one you have. And I'm but I don't have that vendor for this. I have him for that. And they're but our DLP is better. I'm you don't seem to be listening. You're making your own use case and trying to insert it as this is the problem. Your best thing is the fire that I want to go get. And I go, I don't care. And I said, we bought this other vendor for this or that. And I'm not for your use case. You don't do this. And I said, I'm not taking on another vendor. So I'm do you do this? The major use case we have. And they're no, we don't do that well. And I said, okay, then we're done. Well, we should talk more. I'm no, we shouldn't, because you're trying to find a problem to insert your solution into. And with that, I'll pause so the others can speak as well.
That you might not have. Yeah, yeah. Others.
It's so true, Eric. In fact, the ways that if someone comes to me and says, even if it's a vendor, it's the inside salesperson, it's the business development person, it's the person who says, here's the generic email that's going to be able to solve every problem. Come to me if you respond if you want to hear more. I don't respond. 48 hours later, you get another email. Just want to remind you, you have to respond. No, it's about understanding our business, our long-term vision, and building the partnerships. Some of what ChatGPT said was correct. It's right now the biggest problem is the fact that there's so many people trying to sell so many products that solve potentially problems, but they don't understand what your problem is that they want to solve. And you can't go off on one-offs all the time.
Yeah. Very good. Very good. Anything you'd like to add?
Well, so just building upon this entire concept that we're walking through, the whole notion of personalization was absent from the ChatGPT response. The whole notion of personalization and recommendation that come from, my trusted group of CISO friends, peers, those that I've made contacts with. We're all trying to solve very similar problems with very unique applications. And when I mean not business like applications that we're actually using, but I'm applying concepts and risk mitigation methodologies in a different sense than Patty or Eric, because our businesses have different things that we care about. So generic responses or generic notions from vendors don't usually hit and stick to the same degree. So when I'm trying to convey cyber value at risk, or if I'm trying to help my leadership team prioritize, and understand where I'm focusing resources to help sales or enable business resiliency, or close gaps to enhance customer trust, those vendors or partners that are more attuned to some of those more business, higher level seeking issues that can also connect the dots to security, but can convey how they're helping organizations and CISOs and teams, execute on those either in parallel or one or the other. They're going to have a higher likelihood of making it through the noise, through peer recommendations or me seeing or hearing good things about them. But I think we've established here that cold outreach has a very low likelihood of succeeding. And Eric could not have spoken louder on saying, I'm here to advocate for my team, and they're going to be the ones ultimately executing on a day-to-day basis. I'm here to make sure that what we're implementing is the right use of cycles, capacity, resources, and to ensure we have alignment across peers and leadership. So it's a multifaceted solution that our vendor counterparts are trying to oversimplify.
And if can I just add one thing, Rob? You mentioned the cold outreach, like you kind of started to go there a little bit with it. My biggest thing with the cold outreach now is, like, especially LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a great tool. LinkedIn can also be a wild west of thing. I will insert your own thoughts and things here. But what I found actually the cold outreach is why I don't look at it in those areas now is because it gets mixed in with so many other things. Like the number of times that I've gotten a recruiter that says, I may be great, I have a great job for you as this senior security analyst at my level. And it's like, and you get these in all these levels. And I'm like, it's almost where LinkedIn now, I'm like, unless it's somebody I know and connected to is coming to me, like for something like these other ones, I'm like, it is just noise. And literally I can't hit thanks, not interested fast enough. And half the time I probably haven't read it. And that's right, wrong, or indifferent, because I get mixed in with so many of those, you'd be great for this junior role that starts at, this X position. And it's like, you really haven't read, as well as the cold outreaches where they're asking me about disposal of equipment or other things. I'm like, but that's not my job, or this or that. So you're already in a bad medium space already.
Yeah, I can chime in here, not from a CISO point of view, but from a marketing point of view. We run many under our parent company, ISMG. We do run a lot of events, and some of them are more intimate, like CISO roundtable type of events. You'd be surprised how many times I get invitations from other groups that are running those events, but they want me to participate as a subject matter expert. And I always end up writing back. And I actually, for the most part, I usually do end up taking the time because I feel bad. I'm in that game, but I end up writing back and saying, if you look at my profile, I'm not a cybersecurity practitioner. I said I'm just a lonely marketer. If you ever have a marketing centric event, I'd be happy to think about it. But yeah, it just really proves your point. There's such a long way to go to do a little bit of research and understand who you're actually reaching out to, and have a message that's appropriate for them. Well, Julie, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I thought it was interesting what was said about you are getting approached for use cases that are not ones that you actually have or need for a certain type of technology. So I'm wondering, is there ever a time when, a client or a vendor, let's say, has enough of an interesting breakthrough solution so you don't have a use case for it today, but you could actually see one up ahead, or get interested enough in something, and maybe it's 5x or 10x or 50x better than something that's happening today, or because so much is new in the technology as it comes out so quickly and shifts. Is there ever a way or a time that your attention is captured by something that's kind of net new, without a given use case, I guess?
Yeah, good, Patricia.
For me, some of it is I could see a fabulous project that 6 months, 8 months from now, we could do a POC, but I do not control the resources. I do not control the infrastructure. I do not control a lot of that. I have to work with others so it's a long game. Even if it's something that you see is a fantastic opportunity to transform part of your security program, depending on your size, depending on your role of responsibility, depending on your complexity in your IT structure or your product structure, your manufacturing structure, it is a long game to get to the point of POC. It's not that sounds great. Can we start something tomorrow? And that's another thing is I feel there's an expectation if I ever have a gleam of interest in an opportunity, I have to say it's not happening in the short term. If you want to work with me long term, that we could plan it out properly, absolutely stay with it. But please do not ask me at the end of this meeting if there's going to be a POC.
And Patricia, you are so right in that, where you're right. There's a lot of times now with things where you can connect into and do API things. They're like, we can do a POC, we can plug in tomorrow, and we can run it right away. And it's like, okay, great. But the people who need to look at it, operationalize it, this was maybe not on the charts. This was not on the list of resourcing things and stuff we do, we're going to come out with all these details. I think you're right. Julie, you mentioned another thing, do you see that long term? And I think, Patricia, you also said it, that you need other players. I've seen one interesting technology where it's it would help in security, but it has a bigger, and the I'll call it the payback, for lack of a better term, or the return on investment, is really in our infrastructure space. And I'll say it's in an enterprise browsing, browser workspace. For us, it's well, this is really interesting. But they keep coming in, well, we want to do this one. But I'm it's not just a security thing. It's an infrastructure. Can we replace virtual machines and virtual desktop? Can we do this? I said, that takes this person, that person, these things. And I'm so we continue to look at problems and say, okay, well, will this help? Will not? But you're right. It is in some of these things, and especially the larger organization you get, it is very much of a long game. This is not we're going to do a POC. We can plug in an hour. We do it in a month. And then, at the end of March, you're signing, an order form and putting it through.
And Eric, also what you mentioned about operationalizing, a vendor could come in and say, X firm, and I've had them pass, your competitor, blah, put this up in 4 weeks. Did they really operationalize it fully, or did they install the platform and then they have a year worth of work to get it to the point that it's really useful, but they rush the implementation in without having the buy-in to truly extend the operation to make it a formal, usable product at the end? So it's so quick. In theory, what do you consider to be the end game? Vendor, do you consider to be you've sold it and you've put it in per se, or are we truly getting value out of it and it's something we want to have sustained and part of our ecosystem?
Yeah, a lot of security leaders are thinking in terms of months and years. So we're already thinking about the next steps on our strategy, right, for the following fiscal year or 2 or 3. Now, that doesn't mean we know exactly what we're going to do, but we've hedged some bets and we're already having exploratory conversations. But the reason why I mentioned that is because it goes back to this whole notion of seeding and ensuring we have alignment across our business leaders, across our peers, and that's not something that you can do very quickly, whether it's a POC or you have a hard identified solution. It's all about internally me maintaining the existing relationships, the positive momentum that we're making, the support, the evangelism. If a vendor is doing the hard work, knows their worth, knows their value proposition, is proving their worth by going out and solving some, other problems for other folks, freely discussing and talking about those and other points of demonstration that I can peruse and view or have my team get exposure to, that's great to consume, right? It's great when vendors can get out there and potentially show what they're doing to move the industry forward without expecting something in return. Those get picked up on the radar, right? And we'll keep track. And if things make sense, then maybe we'll reach out. But vice versa, it's a much longer and more difficult roadmap, even if I have a direct need. Let us pull you along. We don't like to really get pulled, right? It's about being respectful, trust, and making sure that you're giving back to the security community and knowing where your desire to sustain long-term relationships across the board is versus just going out there and trying to build up a massive database of folks that you're reaching out to.
Mm-hmm. Good.
One other quick question, if I could ask, we have this question come up a lot in terms of named case studies and anonymous case studies. If you see an anonymous case study for a technology solution, but you read it as authentic, does that work for you? Are you interested in that, or must it be named in order for it to have some effect?
I will read a case study, but it's not going to make or break whether or not I work with a vendor. What's going to make or break is through the process. Does their engineers, salespeople, technical support, operations, are they there with you lockstep, actually solving your problems per implementation and beyond? The case study, okay, I understand people do it, but I don't find it valuable at all.
Well,
I use it. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say it's sort of like referrals, right? I mean, you never get a bad referral, you never see a negative case study, right? It's almost like, it's self-serving.
Yes.
Yeah, it's another point of reference, right? Just like I'm not going to rely on a Gartner or Forrester report as something to trust blindly. Same thing with the case study. Same thing with intense customer referrals. I think hearing from a customer is great, but being able to go offline with said customer or other individuals of those customers where we can have a very blunt conversation and be direct about wins, struggles, failures, because how partners step up to ensure success when they usually stumble. And let's be honest, it's technology, right? There haven't been very many cases where folks haven't stumbled, but how you respond and ensure success, ensure completion, ensure that the solution's not shelfware, that speaks a lot. And how folks try to do the right thing, even if I'm not subscribing to something. So for example, if I'm loosely having conversations with folks and we've established enough of a relationship that we loosely know what I'm working on, where they're going. And if there's something that through the course of discussion, they can offer up that we can leverage and use without that insistent pressure of monetization and sales and POC, it's just how you deliver and how you operate that, adds a lot to the conversation. And if that same commonality, that same culture exists among several folks, I think Patty had talked about the competence and the engagement of the sales engineers and others across the spectrum. That's the type of stuff that makes a good positive impact, but that's also the information that other peers talk about too. When I go back to, the trusted resource, that's not a customer referral.
Yeah, and I agree with Rob. As if I want, like, I had a vendor I talked to at this conference, a new one is like, okay, yeah, I got the forced introduction, because you're there and it's free, and I get it. I get the pay to play. I live in the Chicagoland area, so I get that to a degree with the politics that are around here. It's like, fine, I'll listen to them, but right away it's like, oh, like I got something. Well, they're looking at LinkedIn. It's like, oh, well, you're connected to this or that. You can talk to them about this. I'm like, okay, hold on, like I'll look at your information, talk to you for a few minutes. Yeah, it's interesting. Gave it to the team. It sits with them. Do they think there's interest or not? They're like, well, we can set you up with a customer interaction. I'm like, I have enough contacts and resources, and we, and other CISOs and other people in security. It's like, I don't need you to put me in touch with somebody who's using your product. I'll find them. If I can't find them, then that's got to be a problem. Like, if I can't find in the list of hundreds and hundreds and stuff, that one that's using it, like, that's got to be a problem there. So, and that's the whole thing. So when you're looking at these salespeople, make sure you're doing right by your current customers. They are your probably best resource, even offline, to sales. I know I'm a very proud user of a certain product and stuff like that. And I've had people in my general, area industry, when they've had a question about something or couldn't this or that, or even, maybe looking to buy something, they message me. It's like, hey, are you using this? I know you're, a longtime customer of this platform. Can you give me the insight about it? And we have a one-on-one conversation. Those are the best things you do. You take your current customers and you make sure they're educated and you build them, because they're your greatest resource. So yes, take them to dinner or have a coffee or a meeting or whatever every once in a while, to make sure they're educated on the things and that they're satisfied with how the services or products are being delivered.
That's really helpful. Thank you.
Great feedback. And while we were sitting here, we got a really interesting input, and it's kind of coming from the opposite side. So I want to bring it up. We talked about, and if I'm hearing everybody correctly, the original question was, when do you get involved, or do you get involved in decision-making processes? And I think what we heard is, for the large part, it's your team, right? It's the people that are going to be implementing those products and services and utilizing it on an everyday basis. Those are the people that you want to actually be speaking with from the vendor community. But what about on the opposite side? This was an interesting one. Like, are there any like products or solutions that you consider like mission critical that you do like insist on being part of like that discovery phase and build out? Like, are there I don't know, identity is the rage at the moment, or whatever it might be. Are there certain product categories or solution sets that you would demand that you get involved in that discovery process?
Well, I mean, from my perspective, it really depends on the order of magnitude and the complexity of the problem we're trying to solve. If it's something that I know is going to touch all of our commercial organizations globally and all of our call centers globally and our field engineers, I may need to want to be part of the process, not as the final decision maker, but to understand the logic so that I can communicate it properly in case people have questions. It's not a dictatorial. It's a way to at least be able to support the teams that are working through why this is important, so that you can communicate it properly when the decision is made.
And when we start looking at success criteria or pain points or things that I'm going to be held accountable for, things that I've committed to delivering for the business, depending on the size, the scope, the complexity, I'm walking in lockstep with my peers in engineering or product or operations, you name it. And together as a group, there might be certain attributes or areas certain of us might get involved to ensure that we're covering all the bases. Generally, if I'm involved in certain conversations, it's with a certain independent partner, right? I know some of us may or may not use, VARs, or might not use managed service providers. Some of us may try to bounce ideas off of agnostic or semi-independent entities to a certain degree to flush out ideas. But when it comes time to specific vendor participation, I'm more likely going to take a step back. I might or might not participate from a listening perspective to see if I pick up any red flags or key wins, but I'm going to allow my team, the folks that are going to be making the recommendation, to lead all of those, but all behind the scenes, I'm usually challenging them to make sure that they're thinking about the correct solutions, they're thinking about the correct order of operations, and so that the analysis is complete. So when it comes time to make the recommendation, there's less hiccups. That's typically how I've functioned as the support and enabler from the security perspective.
Yeah, and I'm very much like that with Ra. I love hearing people are like, the things like, I want to be a CISO someday, and I like always chuckle. I'm like, no, you don't. I'm like, it's like I hear all this. I want to be a CISO. I'm like, no, you don't. I had somebody reported to me, became a CISO at another company, and about a year in a job, he messaged me. He goes, "This job sucks," and I go, "I told you that before you took it, but yet you still did." But when you look at it, you're right. It's how do you enable the team? How do I look at it? How do I look and see, okay, knowing at the level, what blockers are there? What do we have and where are we going from? Obviously, budget standpoint, to other things. What are the ways to see how is this, tie into other business things that are going on? I typically try to stay out of things as much as my team, who may ever listen to this, may laugh at that. But I tend to get involved in things that more impact our colleagues, that an actual end user is going to feel. It's like, okay, do it to me first, send it to me first. I'm on an upgrade path for like things in Office. So like they're, pushing a new Office to my computer, so I can test it. Like, let me test and feel how all those things are first. So when it goes south, and if it happens to one of our executives or a white glove person, they're going to potentially go to my boss, which something happened today, and a president of one division, came to her, and then thus I'm like, stuff rolls downhill. It then lands with me and somebody else. So I want to see those things. Other things, technical infrastructure in the background, I want those teams. I want the security teams. I want the infrastructure teams talking and aligned on what they're doing. And I think that's important. So you're right. It is a judgment of, where you think there's going to be impact, like how you get involved. And it's not necessarily just a dollar driven thing. There was something we did, which was a large dollar spend. I was literally the last mile negotiator with the VAR and the software provider. And that's really all I did. Was I was the finance money guy.
Good. Well, I guess what we're hearing is that there's no one answer, but there's a tremendous amount of managing your teams and providing support to your teams as they're going through that research phase to make sure you're making the right decision. It's good. We're kind of dancing around it to a certain degree, and Julie brought up before the aspect of, sort of like the shiny new objects, right? Something that's perhaps a bit novel or outside the box. That could potentially be one driver for investigating a new solution, but and I know there's not one size fits all answer here, but like, if you were to think about it in general, what are some of the main drivers for investigating new solutions? Like, I know there's always like this dance around regulatory mandates, right? Like, if you have to satisfy some kind of regulatory requirement, you have to do that, right? So you may often look at the vendor community to help do that. Response to an incident, right? If something occurs and you need something to make sure that doesn't happen again, you're going to look into it. But are there like other typical things that occur that sort of come up that make you want to investigate new solutions?
I mean, for us, it's looking for efficiencies in some of the things. Like, if you're just because we've always done something one way for a number of years, and I'll pick on what, like, space, vulnerability management space. It's been one of those you kind of do, you buy these things, so it's Washington. We're always looking for, well, we've done it this way for decades. We all still have the same problem. Is there a different way to do it? A different way to explore it, different way to attack it? Looking at subjects like that. So, part of it is, you're right. Yes, there's the response to incident. Yes, there's those things. For us, there's also client requirements. Certain requirements and certain things that we're doing business that may not be pervasive across, our entire organization, but in pockets and sets. But for me, it's really starting to look at trying to find, is there a different, more efficient and effective way to do things that we continually have to do, instead of just, oh, yep, here comes that renewal, just, okay, yeah, whatever, here you go, sign next. And yes, there is a number of that happens.
I would agree with that. And I think for how I approach this, it's not necessarily a solution. Maybe it's a suite of solutions. because the problem is across multiple OSs, enterprises, global jurisdictions, etc. So it's never about that tool. It's about what's the control or what's the issue you're trying to solve, and what's the bigger picture on the customer impact, the FDA impact, etc. And how are you going to structure something? Maybe a tool will fit in. Maybe it's a process changed. Maybe it's outsourcing something. But it's really, for me, far more at the macro level. We very rarely are we looking at something just because of our space where it's a 3-month thing. We just got to get it.
Yeah. What is the old saying? You know, if you think technology can solve your problem, then you don't understand the problem. You don't understand the technology. Something like that that Bruce Schneier has said before, right? We follow a very same pattern, but to add on to it, we also leverage our risk assessment methodology and risk committee, not from the standpoint that every single issue is a pure risk scenario, but we try to talk about them in terms of plausibility, operational efficiency, as we mentioned here. But then also, you know, are we tracking and communicating the right value at risk and delivery that the program is meeting objectives? And a lot of times it comes to are the right processes that are managed in a either a business unit friendly or decentralized format. Are we at a point where they're mature across the enterprise? Are there pockets where we need to make deviations to business unit specific processes? And that all of a sudden how we apply those processes, that we need to think about doing that differently, which may or may not turn into a technology discussion. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. It's just an evolution of applying existing technology. So on the back end, it's really having that sound awareness and knowledge of what we're trying to accomplish, how we're accomplishing it, and whether or not we need technology guardrails to make that happen with, you know, a lower likelihood of, you know, impact to operations. So we try to add that flavor on it here at Huddle.
Good.
Is there ever a time when, you know, it sounds like your teams are, you know, you give a lot of, you know, freedom or responsibility to your teams to help figure out what is part of the need or what solutions might work for the issue at hand. Is there ever a time when you are brought a solution that is highly recommended by your team that you disagree with or that you cannot take forward for whatever reason?
I mean, that happens. I will tell you, there's actually, now the long story short is, it is a solution we ended up investing in, but I will tell you, and it's an older kind of, you know, more legacy kind of traditional security thing that I've been very much, and I started my career running it in SIM, and I was very much, they wanted to make an investment move, and I'm like, I don't see the value in it. And when I say value, I'm not looking for a return on investment. I'd put $1 in, get $1.50 back. I am looking for, if I put $1 in, are we getting $1 of value back? Just straight, flat, you know, equal thing. And they will tell you, I fought them tooth and nail on it. And I'm like, and just, I don't see the value. Like, where is this? And it took time. They kept building. I went back at them. They do these things. They work with the vendor who is one who's been a longtime partner of ours. So it wasn't like there was, you know, this was new technology. This was an add-on adjacent thing. And it was really, you know, I knew in my back of my mind, it was like, look, we're going to have to get there. But it was like continually challenging them till I felt like, if I can go in front of our CEO or CFO and say, yes, this spend of X dollars, this is the value you get back on it. This is a good spend. They've entrusted me and empowered me to make these decisions for the organization and trust me to do it. And I want to make sure if they come and say, well, we're spending on this, why are we doing it? That I can articulate that value proposition. And it is not a, yeah, you put $1 in and look, you got this much return on that investment necessarily, because a lot of the security things are looked as, you know, kind of like insurance.
And we've had times where I have stopped projects more because we weren't ready operationally. You know, people had underthought the impact to the business and the amount of work that had nothing to do with the technical implementation, but had to do with the sustainable operations and effectiveness of that in the organization. Those are the types of things that I want to make sure the team thinks through first, because put something in and you don't maintain it, it's false sense of security and it's a waste of money.
So when they bring you a business case, it has to include all of these layers.
My team knows absolutely. I'm going to be all about this. Looks really great, but how's it going to work? Who's going to run it? How are we going to govern it? How are we going to make sure it's effective? How are we going to patch it? Let's make sure we get the pictures right the first time.
And Pat, you're so right on the, again, come back to the operationalization. I had where a very large provider of ours gave us free money to implement a number of their tools, and quarter way into it, it was going so poorly. The team's like, the operationalization, this, like, they're like, we can't do this. It's not going to work well. It's not going to work right. We stopped. We gave that vendor basically the money back, like, well, the money that hadn't gotten spent. And it's like, this is failing on all these levels. This partner, this isn't working. And they looked at me like, so you're not going to spend these free dollars? And I'm like, no. And I'm like, it's a bit self-serving. You're trying to implement your things, but the team can't operationalize this. I go, this will just end badly for everyone. And you're right. It's all about, how do you sell or weave into the operationalization of an organization, not just this is great and you should just add this on to every other, flavor of ice cream you already have.
Right. So vendors could potentially get a better traction by thinking that information through themselves and helping to provide it to their prospects, in a way to allow those business cases to be made that include the operational components.
That's why it's the long haul. It's the long game. It's really understanding the ecosystem and when the environment, and the fact that you're never going to just put a tool in or a thing in because it's a shiny penny. You're not. I joke with my team, if your tool can prevent phishing, my CEO, my CFO, and everyone wants to click on links, do my laundry, and stop the snow up here in Vermont, I will sign up. But that's the type of unicorn that I think, salespeople are trying to position, that this is the only thing that can do it. Guess what? 80%, 80-20 rule happens in most of our organizations. We don't go for the gold standard. We go for the thing that works in our environment adequately and it's cost effective and can be operationally supported.
Yeah, when it comes to, I think on the same trend, we categorize it as just post implementation or ongoing, JOB part of our template when we're not only evaluating new solutions but also holding the existing ones accountable. Does it still meet the enhanced or evolving expectations that the business has? Because that's equally important. That could also justify a reevaluation of, is this the right partnership? So it works both ways for new and existing vendors too. We put them through the same type of maturity process where we're evaluating, does it work? Are we meeting the original intended goals, and how does our post implementation or that ongoing day-to-day support look like?
Thank you.
Great. Well, we're speeding through this here, and I'm realizing we're already over the halfway point, so we're going to have time for just a few more questions, so we'll try to be efficient. I'm going to try to group a couple of them into one question here, and it goes back to, this is a bit of the elephant in the room, which is cold outreach, right? And that's where I think many vendors, many sales reps, many marketing folks, they put a lot of concentration on that initial outreach to try to instigate that first-time discovery call with you. And I'm kind of grouping this together because if you know it or not, and I'm kind of being tongue-in-cheek here, when you download a white paper, your name goes into some database, right? And that's often the impetus for a vendor to reach out to you, right? They're assuming that there's some kind of basic interest in what they have to offer based on you accessing that information. And that's what ends up resulting in that cold outreach, if they haven't found you before on LinkedIn. So I guess the sort of multifaceted question is there room for cold outreach to you, to CISOs? And if the answer is no, it's just a non-starter, that's fine. But, if you can think of, have there been times where perhaps you've accessed a piece of content and someone followed up with you afterwards, or some chain of events that actually did result in you personally being engaged with that product or solution provider? How did that go?
I think for me, the electronic communications are tough, and it's not because they're emails, right? It's, you're mixed in that world, the LinkedIn, in the muddle of things that get sent there, so you just get lumped in. obviously in emails, and like every morning I open up, my email kind of the digest that's come through, and like there's 75 emails. I scan through it, see if there's anything that really shouldn't be in there, hit the delete button, it's gone. I really think the avenues are now like, number one, there's organizations doing some of these kind of 1 hour lunch and learns like virtually. Like, okay, like that's how I got introduced to Wiz. Had no idea who they were. Had a 1 hour lunch and learn. They had, I think it was Ann's chief security officer presenting. It was really interesting. We were looking at it, told the team, they went off. Thus, now we're along, customer 2-3 years. I think the other thing is like doing some of these, dinner events. Yes, some of these cyber events, in person, where you get just a little bit of time. Like, okay, look, we're gonna look like there's a product that like I took in, kind of interesting, sat with them at lunch, talked a little bit, had an organic conversation. And I think that's the big thing. Can you start with at least an organic conversation, not with an instantaneous hard sell? I think those are way, but the electronic mediums are incredibly tough because they're just it's such a muddled medium right now.
Well, not to mention, I think we're a bit overexhausted from the electronic medium after the last few years, especially. So doubling down on, I know it's asking additional, time and effort for the development representatives or vendors, but it doesn't have to be just a dinner or just a lunch and learn. There's been times where I've seen other folks offer standing coffee or breakfast meetings, right? If they just invite a group of leaders, decision makers, or folks are interested in putting a face to a name, learning a little bit more. It can be a variety of venues, engagement formats. If there are local CISO or security events that are going on in an area, if you sponsor that and are just there to learn and catch up with folks, or just talk to us for 10-15 minutes, not necessarily about selling, but just being there to learn, be vulnerable, get to know folks, just understand the dynamics of the community. All of those things are, I would say, deposits on much larger relationships that could be formed, might be called upon. But with the notion of providing information and being a helping hand, those should be the driving forces. And I think we all can agree it does lead to a longer sales cycle. It may not lead in a closed opportunity, but you're definitely going to not rub someone the wrong way, because we all, it's a very tight-knit community. And if you rub enough people the wrong way, word gets around.
For me, it's about, even in those 10-15 minutes in some of these events, use it to educate me about something. And it doesn't have to be how your product works. If there's a reason why your product exists, there's a reason why you think you're solving a problem. Explain to me what the problem is that you see that's so pervasive that you made the investment in that product. That to me then helps understand the driving force behind the sales pitch. And they can also understand, in some cases, the maturity of the organization, the thought process, etc. I find that to be far more engaging than here's zero trust. Here's how we do it. Don't talk to me about what the problem is.
Well said. Yeah. Well, you guys perfectly segued into the next question that we have here, and it does touch on events. There are lots of different types of events that are accessible, right? You've got your big major conferences and trade shows. There are a handful of those throughout the year. You have your sort of like regional summits, with lots of sessions throughout like a day or two. You have the more intimate events, right? You've brought up some lunch and learns and sort of like the executive roundtable types of events. Are there any that you find particularly useful to you more than others? So
I like the smaller events, like doing some dinner events and things like that, 15, 20 people, maybe it can be 30 or 40, different organizations will put those on where you can have kind of events where there's a little bit of education to it. And yes, obviously there's a level of you're getting a free piece of meat and a potato, and so somebody's got to pay for it. And that's fine. I like those small to medium sized events. I'm one of those who, there's two things in my life that I hope I can go to my grave with. Number one, not ever seeing the movie Titanic. Number two is not ever attending RSA conference. just because I have no desire to be in that horde amount of people. And I don't, and while I know there's others who totally disagree with me, and I get it, you know, well, all these vendors, you can see it all at once and all this or that. I'm like, I do not have a desire to do that. You know, and that's why I think this, because I don't think I can have a real conversation. And that's primarily why.
I find a lot of events that are held by independent agnostic third parties. That again, some of it is amongst ourselves talking about our problems. Some of it is a vendor come in, but it's not a sales pitch. You know, for me, I'll put it in the realm of RSA and some of these other ones. The ones where you have to go and speak to 7 vendors mandatory. If you go for the day, you have your list of people that you have to talk to, even if you don't want to. You have to put down that you have problems to solve because everyone wants the intro. You know, will say now that I won't go because I don't want to have forced conversations with vendors because I think I understand where we need to go. And in a 20 minutes times 7, I'm not going to get what I need. And I'm not going to have the time to sit there and say 3 weeks from now, let's have a 2-day offsite to start talking about this.
Yeah, the trade-off in investment in some of those events where, you know, they claim it's zero cost, come, we'll take care of hotel, flight, put you up, and the only thing you have to trade is 2 days of your time. No, thank you. I'm sorry. There's as we all just mentioned, there's better uses of it. I personally prefer getting up extremely early, grabbing a cup of coffee, and having a chat about business, and that I can get started on my day. And that's usually when I'm the most productive. I know everybody has their own pockets in the day, right? There's some folks that are and gravitate more towards afternoon, evening events. I love morning and lunch. So folks that are willing to get creative on how they offer the opportunities to learn a little bit more. I mean, sure, there's times where I also download on-demand content, for example, where I don't have to insert information, or if you do, it's not my information, but I'm going to get your webinar, I'm going to get your X, Y, and Z so that I can review on the side. But then I'm going to pass that information along to my team, right? So make it accessible. Don't make the forced information gathering as part of a requirement. And my gosh, I don't understand how every email is let off with, are you attending RSA? Can I get 10 minutes of your time? I mean, the peak and the intensity of those, and then around the Black Hat, or even around some of the more localized or the besides events that go on around the country. I get that they have their time and place, but that can be done, I think, with more appropriate marketing dollars and focus.
Yeah. And on a side note, Rob, we run quite a few of the luncheons and dinners, but we have an editor here, one of our moderators, that's always advocating for the breakfast events. So we're going to send him your name. You'll probably get an invitation. Big fan of those. But yeah, totally agree with everything that you're saying, and very typical feedback. You know, and I will put in a little bit of a plug for the RSA conference, only because I've been there for so many years. I've had so many experiences. They do have pockets around, you know, there are opportunities for those more intimate, you know, dinners or, you know, sort of peer-to-peer smaller networking opportunities, but you have to be willing to kind of search them out and, you know, put in an effort to get involved. But totally understood on the one-to-one meetings as well. Well, guys, we're getting right down to the end of the wire here, and I just have one more question for you, and you don't have to provide too elaborative responses if you want. We're just looking for some general guidance, but where do you turn just on a day-to-day basis for staying up with the industry? How are you getting your news? How are you getting, you know, insight into what the latest happenings are? Is it LinkedIn? Is it publisher websites? Is it some kind of internal communication that you have? Where do you turn to day to day to stay up to date on what's happening?
So for me, it's there's something, definitely LinkedIn. I think there's good information content that can be there. 2, it's private email group I have with a number of other CISOs where things, you know, we have that post stuff. And those are really the 2 primary regular ones. I do also get some things, you know, ISMG, and just a few emails. There are certain ones I will look at, and there are others I, you know, will just ignore. I look at those primarily, you know, as in, you know, a quick scan of certain things. I'll get in the morning, an email digest of things, and then, you know, move on.
I have several news services that will cull data, news articles, et cetera, relevant about compliance, privacy, security. And I'll read those digests first thing in the morning. And then I'll follow up from there on some other friends or other people will normally send me things. And reciprocal, but I will take advantage of some of the ability that they have out there to scan, cull, and send to me.
Yeah, I don't have much else to add. I mean, we nailed the private email groups, private Slack groups for certain areas. I know that ISMG Cyber Ed Board put out some good information, but then I do have a list of podcasts that I subscribe to. So again, in the morning, a commute, in the afternoon, if there's or during gym time, we'll throw on some of those podcasts, catch up in addition to some of the articles that I'll tag for later reading. I do also build part of updates into some of my directs, one-on-ones. And so we'll also share back and forth if we're not also sharing digitally to make sure that if there's anything top of mind, because we also maintain updates back to our senior leaderships. We want to make sure we're capturing and reporting not only trends, but what we're thinking about it, what we're doing. So that kind of how it gives and takes. It's not just for my own personal enrichment, but I'm also trying to filter and anticipate what questions might come up. And so I know a lot of my colleagues here might do some of the same things, but there's multiple uses for a lot of where the information comes from and how we can consume and advocate for it.
Good. Well, everyone, really appreciate your time. Can't tell you how much we value it. We know that you three have very important jobs, more important than trying to educate the community on how to sell to you, but something that is definitely an issue. And we're trying to provide education to sales and marketing folks to hopefully make these engagements more fruitful, more efficient, and have better outcomes. So we really appreciate the time from all of our panelists. One final shout out to the Cyber Ed board community for helping us put this together. And hopefully all of you got something out of it that are attending, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.